I walked into Christmas morning with my two kids carrying wrapped presents and hoping for the first peaceful holiday since my divorce. The moment I stepped through the familiar front door decorated with fresh garland, my father Richard stopped mid-conversation with my sister Sarah and her husband Mike. He turned toward me with cold disapproval etched across his weathered face and stated flatly, "Everything was peaceful until you showed up." My 6-year-old son, Tommy, immediately dropped his gaze to the polished hardwood floor, his small shoulders sagging with shame. My heart shattered watching my little boy's reaction to his grandfather's cruelty. I knelt down, kissed Tommy's soft brown hair gently, and looked my father directly in the eyes. "Then my money's leaving with me." The silence that followed my words felt suffocating. Sarah shifted uncomfortably on the leather couch, her Christmas sweater suddenly seeming too bright for the darkness filling the room. Mike pretended to study his smartphone screen with unusual intensity, clearly wishing he could disappear entirely. My 4-year-old daughter Emma sensed the tension immediately and pressed herself against my leg, her tiny fingers gripping my jeans with desperate strength. Standing there in that living room I had helped renovate just 18 months earlier, I reflected on how twisted our family dynamics had become. The irony burned through me like acid. For the past 2 years, ever since Richard lost his position at the automotive parts factory, where he had worked for 23 years, I had become his financial lifeline. Every month, $1,800 left my checking account to cover his mortgage payment. Another $400 disappeared to keep his electricity, gas, and water running. The property taxes, insurance premiums, and his prescription medications after his minor heart attack last spring all came from my construction management salary. I worked 60-hour weeks, sometimes 70, to ensure my father maintained the comfortable lifestyle he had known his entire adult life. While I drove a 15-year-old pickup truck with 200,000 miles and worn seats, Richard enjoyed his 2,000-square-foot home with the new roof I had financed. The $12,000 repair bill had wiped out most of my emergency savings, but I had prioritized his shelter over my own financial security. Tommy stood frozen beside the Christmas tree, its twinkling lights reflecting off the tears forming in his young eyes. Emma continued clinging to me, her innocent mind unable to process why Grandpa was being mean to Daddy on Christmas morning. These children had already endured enough pain watching their mother struggle with addiction and their parents' marriage crumble. They deserved better than witnessing their grandfather's inexplicable hostility. The expensive gifts I had carefully selected lay in colorful piles beneath the tree. The 65-inch television I had purchased for Richard sat prominently in the corner, still in its original packaging. The gaming console for Tommy, the art supplies for Emma, the jewelry for Sarah, and the tools for Mike represented weeks of overtime work and careful budgeting. Every present reflected my desire to bring joy to our fractured family during the holiday season. But as I looked at my father's stern expression and my son's wounded posture, I realized that my generosity had somehow transformed into resentment. The man I had financially supported without question now treated my presence like a burden, my children like unwelcome intruders in a home I was literally paying to maintain. I began methodically gathering the presents I had brought, loading them back into their shopping bags with calm determination. Richard watched from his recliner, his jaw set in stubborn defiance, apparently believing I was making empty threats. Sarah finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack, maybe we should all just calm down and enjoy Christmas together." I continued collecting gifts, my movements deliberate and unhurried. The new winter coats for the kids, the expensive bourbon for Richard, the spa gift certificate for Sarah. Each item represented hours of my labor sacrifices I had made willingly out of love and family obligation. Yet somehow my efforts had created an environment where my father felt entitled to humiliate me in front of my children. When I picked up the television box, Richard finally moved. He followed me toward the front door, his slippers shuffling against the hardwood floors I had helped refinish 2 summers ago. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Jack?" His question hung in the cold December air as I loaded the TV into my truck bed. Tommy and Emma watched from the doorway, confusion replacing their earlier excitement about Christmas morning. I had promised them a wonderful holiday with their grandfather, aunt, and uncle. Instead, they were witnessing the destruction of relationships they had counted on for stability. "I'm taking my gifts with me, Dad, along with everything else I've been providing." The realization began dawning in his eyes, but his pride prevented him from backing down. 20 years of being the family patriarch of making decisions and expecting compliance had not prepared him for this moment of accountability. Richard had spent months complaining about my presence at family gatherings, despite my financial contributions keeping his household afloat. He criticized my parenting, questioned my work ethic, and made subtle comments about my divorce being evidence of my character flaws. Yet when mortgage payments came due, when appliances needed replacing, when medical bills arrived, I remained his first phone call. The twisted dynamic had created a prison for both of us. I felt trapped by responsibility and guilt, while he felt diminished by dependence. Instead of addressing our mutual frustration honestly, we had allowed resentment to poison what should have been grateful interdependence. But watching Tommy's shame and Emma's fear crystallized everything for me. My children's emotional well-being mattered more than preserving a dysfunctional family peace. They needed to see their father standing up for dignity and respect, not accepting abuse for the sake of avoiding conflict. As I secured the television in my truck bed, Richard moved closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. The reality of losing his financial support was beginning to penetrate his stubborn facade. "Now hold on just a minute, son." The conversation that followed in my father's driveway changed everything I thought I knew about our family relationships. What started as Richard demanding an explanation for my actions quickly transformed into revelations that left me reeling with betrayal and hurt. "You can't just take those presents and leave," Richard insisted, his breath visible in the frigid morning air. "The kids are expecting Christmas here. Sarah's been cooking since yesterday." I secured the last of the gifts in my truck and turned to face him fully. "The kids are expecting respect for their father, something you apparently can't provide. Respect." Richard's laugh was bitter and hollow. "You show up here acting like you own the place because you help out a little with the bills." "Help out a little." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. "Dad, I pay your mortgage. I pay your utilities. I paid for your roof, your furnace, your medical expenses. I've kept you from losing this house." Sarah appeared in the doorway, still wearing her Christmas apron, her face pale with obvious distress. She walked toward us, slowly wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "Jack, please don't leave. We can work this out." "Can we, Sarah, because I'm starting to wonder what exactly has been happening behind my scenes?" My sister's expression crumbled, and I knew immediately that she possessed information she had been hiding. The guilty look in her eyes confirmed suspicions I had been suppressing for months. "Tell him," I said quietly. "Tell me what's really been going on." Sarah glanced between Richard and me, clearly torn between loyalties. Richard's sharp look warned her to remain silent, but the tension had reached a breaking point where truth could no longer be contained. "Dad's been telling everyone that you're the problem," she finally whispered. "At Thanksgiving, when you couldn't make it because Emma was sick, he told all the aunts and uncles that you're an ungrateful deadbeat who only shows up when you need something." The words hit me like ice water. "What?" "He said you abandoned your kids with Jennifer and live irresponsibly. He told them you're always asking him for money and never contribute anything to the family." I stared at Richard, waiting for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make sense of such blatant lies. Instead, he crossed his arms defensively and looked away. "He told Uncle Frank and Aunt Carol that you're a bad father who doesn't take care of his children properly." Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "Everyone's been avoiding you at gatherings because they think you're using the family." The betrayal was so complete, so systematic, that I struggled to process it. For months, I had noticed extended family members being cooler toward me, conversations ending when I approached invitations coming less frequently. I had attributed their behavior to discomfort, with my divorce not deliberate poisoning of my reputation. Why? I asked Richard. Why would you destroy my relationships with everyone? Because I'm tired of being treated like a charity case, he snapped back. You think your money makes you better than everyone else. You think it gives you the right to judge how I live my life. I never judged you. I helped you because I love you, because Mom made me promise to take care of you. At the mention of my mother, Sarah broke down completely. That's the worst part, Jack. Mom specifically asked all of us to support each other after she was gone. She was so worried about Dad being alone about the family falling apart. She made you promise to help him financially because she knew you were the most stable. But she made me promise something too. I waited, dreading what was coming next. She made me promise to make sure Dad appreciated your sacrifices and treated you with respect. I've failed her completely. I've watched Dad trash your reputation for months and said nothing because he threatened to cut me out of his will if I defended you. The manipulation ran deeper than I had imagined. Richard had not only lied about me to extended family members, but he had used financial threats to ensure Sarah's silence and compliance with his false narrative. Every family gathering for the past year. Sarah continued through her tears. He's painted you as the villain. Uncle Frank asked me privately if it was true that you don't pay child support. Cousin Beth said she couldn't believe how selfish you had become since the divorce. Aunt Carol actually thanked Dad for being such a responsible grandfather, since you apparently weren't stepping up as a father. I thought about the confused looks, the shortened conversations, the way family members had gradually stopped, including me in holiday planning discussions. My own relatives had been convinced that I was a deadbeat dad, who neglected his children and exploited his father's generosity. The truth is the complete opposite. I said, my voice steady, despite the fury building inside me. I have primary custody because Jennifer struggled with addiction during our marriage. I work double shifts to support my household and yours. I've sacrificed my own financial stability to ensure Dad never missed a mortgage payment or went without medication. Richard's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. Being confronted with the reality of his lies in front of Sarah stripped away his ability to maintain his false narrative. You want gratitude for doing what any decent son should do, he demanded. I want honesty. I want my children treated with kindness. I want my family to know the truth about what kind of father and son I actually am. Sarah was sobbing now, the weight of months of complicity crushing down on her. I should have defended you. I should have told everyone the truth. But Dad said if I contradicted his stories, he would leave everything to charity and cut both of us off completely. Mike's been out of work, and we can't afford to lose our inheritance. The complete picture emerged like a photograph, developing in slow motion. Richard had weaponized his will, his house, and his influence to control the family narrative. He had systematically destroyed my reputation while benefiting from my financial support, creating a situation where I was both essential to his survival and resented for my role in maintaining his lifestyle. But the most devastating realization was yet to come. As Sarah wiped her tears and looked at me with desperate pleading, she revealed the information that would transform my protective instincts into something approaching rage. Jack, there's something else, something worse. I braced myself, knowing that whatever came next would cross a line from which there would be no return. Dad's been meeting with Jennifer. The words hung between us like a death sentence. I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications of what Sarah had just revealed began sinking in. Richard had been secretly meeting with my ex-wife, the woman whose addiction had destroyed our marriage and put my children at risk. What do you mean he's been meeting with Jennifer? I asked, my voice barely controlled. Sarah glanced at Richard, who had gone completely pale, his bravado evaporating as his most dangerous secret was exposed. Tell me everything, I demanded. Right now. He's been calling her for months, Sarah admitted. Ever since you got primary custody, he told her he could help her get the kids back if she wanted to try again. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The custody arrangement had been traumatic for everyone involved, but it had been necessary. Jennifer's drinking had escalated to the point where she was passing out while watching the children. I had found Emma alone in the bathtub while Jennifer slept off a bender in the bedroom. The judge had awarded me primary custody with supervised visitation for Jennifer until she completed treatment and maintained sobriety. "Hey, what?" I whispered. "Dad told Jennifer that you're financially unstable and emotionally abusive to Tommy and Emma. He said he would testify that you don't take proper care of them, that you leave them alone too often, that you don't feed them properly." Each word felt like a knife, twisting deeper. My father had been building a case against my fitness as a parent, while simultaneously accepting my financial support for his own survival. "He's been taking pictures." Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "Pictures of the kids when they look tired or upset. He claims it's evidence that you don't take care of them properly. Last weekend when you brought them over after Tommy's soccer game, he took photos of them looking sweaty and dirty, and said it proved you don't maintain their hygiene." I remembered that afternoon. Tommy's team had played in muddy conditions, and both kids had been exhausted from running around in the heat. They had been happy and excited to tell their grandfather about the game, but I had noticed Richard acting strangely, stepping away to use his phone several times. "He's been coaching Tommy too," Sarah whispered, and this revelation hit me the hardest of all. Teaching him to say negative things about living with you, asking him leading questions about whether Daddy ever makes him sad or scared. Suddenly, everything about Tommy's recent behavior made horrible sense. The 6-year-old had become withdrawn and anxious over the past few weeks, asking strange questions about whether I loved him, whether he was being good enough, whether he was going to have to go live with Mommy again. I had attributed his emotional regression to normal post-divorce adjustment, but it had actually been the result of systematic psychological manipulation by his own grandfather. "Jennifer is scheduled to file for full custody the day after Christmas," Richard said quietly, speaking for the first time since Sarah had begun revealing his schemes. "I already provided an affidavit detailing your failures as a father." The timeline crystallized with sickening clarity. Richard had planned to enjoy Christmas dinner and presents funded by my labor, then support a legal action designed to take my children away from me. He had been playing a long game undermining my parenting while benefiting from my financial sacrifices. "You've been lying to family members about my character while secretly working to destroy my relationship with my children," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "All while living in a house I pay for eating food, I help provide enjoying comforts I make possible. Those kids belong with their mother," Richard replied, attempting to justify his betrayal. "A man who can't even maintain his own marriage shouldn't be trusted with children." The cruelty of that statement delivered on Christmas morning while my confused children waited inside revealed the depth of Richard's resentment and manipulation. He had weaponized my divorce, my financial struggles, and even my children's well-being to serve his psychological need to regain control and superiority in our relationship. I looked at Tommy through the window, still standing beside the Christmas tree, with his head down and Emma pressed against the glass, watching us argue. These innocent children had become pawns in their grandfather's twisted game of revenge against imagined slights and wounded pride. "Jennifer agreed to this?" I asked Sarah. "She's scared," Sarah admitted. "Dad convinced her that you're planning to move far away and prevent her from seeing the kids. He told her you've been saying terrible things about her to Tommy and Emma, turning them against their mother." More lies, more manipulation. The truth was that I had been encouraging the children to maintain a loving relationship with Jennifer while she worked on her sobriety. I had never said anything negative about their mother in their presence, understanding how damaging that would be to their emotional development. Richard had created fictional grievances on both sides, convincing Jennifer that I was alienating the children from her, while simultaneously building a case that I was an unfit father. His scheme required him to be the solution to problems he had invented, positioning himself as the concerned grandfather, protecting everyone from my supposed failures. "The filing is scheduled for tomorrow," I asked. "Thursday morning." Richard confirmed. Jennifer's lawyer believes the affidavit and photographs provide sufficient evidence for an emergency custody modification. I thought about the legal fees, the trauma to the children, the potential damage to their sense of security and stability. Even if Jennifer's petition failed, the process would put Tommy and Emma through another painful evaluation of their living situation. They would be questioned by social workers, possibly separated from me temporarily, definitely forced to confront the instability of their family structure once again, all because their grandfather had chosen to destroy their father rather than appreciate his sacrifices. But as I stood there in the cold morning air, absorbing the full scope of Richard's betrayal, I realized something crucial had shifted inside me. The man who had raised me, who had taught me about responsibility and family loyalty, had systematically violated every principle he had claimed to represent. He had forfeited any right to my protection, my support, or my consideration. The time for preserving false peace at any cost was over. My children needed to see their father fight back against injustice regardless of who was perpetrating it. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through my contacts, looking for my bank's customer service number. "What are you doing?" Richard asked, suddenly nervous. "I'm calling my bank," I replied calmly. "It's time to cancel some automatic payments." What happened next was the most decisive 15 minutes of my adult life. Standing in that driveway with my phone pressed to my ear, I systematically dismantled the financial foundation that had enabled Richard's betrayal and manipulation. "First National Bank Customer Service, this is Amanda. How can I help you today? I need to cancel several automatic payments immediately." I said, my voice calm and professional, despite the emotional storm raging inside me. Richard's expression shifted from defiance to alarm as he realized I was serious about cutting off his financial lifeline. He reached for my phone, but I stepped away, maintaining my conversation with the bank representative. "I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment to Richard Thornton account number." I rattled off the information from memory, having set up these payments during a moment of crisis 2 years earlier, when Richard had been facing foreclosure. "Sir, I see that payment is scheduled to process tomorrow, December 26th. Would you like me to stop that payment as well?" "Yes, cancel that one and all future payments to that account." Richard was frantically gesturing, mouthing the word "no" repeatedly, but I continued methodically destroying the financial arrangements that had kept his comfortable lifestyle intact. "I also need to cancel automatic payments to Atlantic Energy account number," the electric company payment that had kept his lights on through 2 winters, "and the automatic payment to City Water Works, the utility that ensured hot showers and clean dishes." Sarah watched in growing horror as she began calculating the financial implications. Without my support, Richard would default on his mortgage within 30 days, lose his utilities within 2 weeks, and face immediate financial catastrophe. "Finally, I need to cancel the automatic payment to First Credit Union for vehicle loan number, the car payment for the sedan. Richard drove to his doctor appointments and grocery shopping. All payments have been canceled successfully, Mr. Thornton. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "That's everything. Thank you for your assistance." I ended the call and immediately opened my banking app to confirm the cancellations. 6 automatic payments that had totaled nearly $3,000 monthly were now terminated. Money that had been leaving my account for 24 consecutive months would now remain available for my children's needs and my own financial recovery. Richard stared at my phone screen as I showed him the confirmation numbers for each cancellation. The reality of his situation was beginning to penetrate his shock and denial. "You can't be serious about this," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't afford those payments on my own. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy my relationship with my children," I replied. "Let me break down exactly what you've been taking for granted." I pulled out a small notebook from my truck's glove compartment, where I had been tracking the family expenses for tax purposes, and began reading the figures aloud. Monthly mortgage payment $1,825. Electric bill average $215. Gas bill average $130. Water and sewer $78. Car payment $349. That's $2,797 every single month. Sarah did quick mental math and gasped. Jack, that's over $33,000 a year! Closer to $34,000, awesome, I confirmed. Plus, the one-time expenses. The roof repair last spring, $12,400. The furnace replacement 18 months ago, $8,200. The medical bills after your heart episode, $6,700. New appliances, when the kitchen flooded, $4,900. The numbers painted a stark picture of financial dependence that Richard had somehow convinced himself to forget or minimize. He had been living far beyond his unemployment benefits and Social Security income, maintaining a middle-class lifestyle entirely through my subsidies. I've also been covering the property taxes, I continued, $4,600 annually. Homeowners insurance, $2,800. Even your prescription medications that Medicare doesn't cover, roughly $200 monthly. Richard was becoming visibly pale as the mathematical reality of his situation sank in. Without my support, his monthly expenses exceeded his income by more than $2,000. He would be facing immediate financial collapse. Over the past 2 years, I estimate I've provided you with approximately $85,000 in direct support, I said. Money I earned working overtime, sacrificing my own financial security, deferring maintenance on my own home, driving a 15-year-old truck, and limiting my children's activities to keep you comfortable. The scope of my sacrifices was stunning even to me when laid out so clearly. I had been essentially supporting 2 households on a construction manager's salary, something that had required careful budgeting, constant overtime work, and significant personal deprivation. While I was doing this, I continued, "You were telling our extended family that I'm a deadbeat who never contributes anything. You were photographing my children to build a custody case against me. You were coaching Tommy to say negative things about his father. You were meeting secretly with Jennifer to help her take my kids away." Sarah was crying again, overwhelmed by the scope of the financial sacrifices I had been making and the cruelty with which Richard had repaid my generosity. "Dad, how could you do this?" she asked him. "Jack has been keeping you from losing everything, and you've been trying to destroy his life." Richard's response revealed the psychological complexity behind his betrayal. "I never asked for his charity," he said defensively. "I didn't want to be dependent on my son for survival. It made me feel like a failure, like less of a man. So instead of being grateful or working to improve your situation, you decided to make me the villain," I said. "You turned my help into evidence of your victimization. I resented needing you," he admitted. "Every time that mortgage payment came out of your account, I felt diminished. Every utility bill you paid made me feel like a child being taken care of by a parent." The psychology was clear but inexcusable. Richard's wounded pride had transformed gratitude into resentment, dependence into hostility, and family loyalty into systematic betrayal. Rather than addressing his feelings honestly or working to regain financial independence, he had chosen to destroy my reputation and relationships as a way of psychologically balancing the scales. But understanding his motivation didn't excuse the damage he had caused or change the reality of what needed to happen next. "Check your accounts," I told him. "See for yourself that the money is gone." Richard pulled out his own phone and logged into his bank app. The color drained from his face as he saw his checking account balance and the absence of pending deposits that had been automatically scheduled for the next day. "Jack, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't survive without your help. I'll lose the house, the car, everything." "You'll lose exactly what you were willing to cost me," I replied. "My children, my reputation, my peace of mind, my relationship with our extended family." The reversal was swift and complete. The man who had been humiliating me in front of my children 30 minutes earlier was now begging for the financial mercy he had been taking for granted while actively sabotaging my life. But his financial panic was only the beginning of the reckoning that was about to unfold. The decision to expose Richard's lies to our extended family was spontaneous but necessary. Standing in that driveway watching him panic about his financial future while my children waited inside confused and hurt, I realized that his manipulation had poisoned relationships I valued deeply. If I was going to rebuild my reputation and protect my children from further psychological damage, the truth needed to spread as systematically as his lies had. I scrolled through my contacts and found Uncle Frank's number. As Richard's older brother and the unofficial patriarch of our extended family, Frank's opinion carried significant weight with aunts, uncles, and cousins. If Richard had convinced Frank that I was irresponsible and ungrateful, those beliefs had likely influenced everyone else's perception of me. "Uncle Frank, it's Jack. I know it's Christmas morning, but I need to tell you something important about what's been happening in our family." Richard tried to grab my phone again, but I walked further away, my voice carrying clearly in the cold air. Sarah remained frozen between us, torn between protecting her father and supporting the truth. "I'm calling to let you know that I've just discovered Dad has been lying to the family about me for months. The stories about me being irresponsible and not contributing to the family are completely false." Frank's voice was immediately concerned. "What do you mean, son? For the past 2 years, I've been paying Dad's mortgage, utilities, car payment, and medical expenses. I've spent over $80,000 keeping him from losing his house. While I've been doing this, he's been telling everyone that I'm a deadbeat who only shows up when I need something." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds before Frank exploded. "He told us you were constantly asking him for money and never paying it back. He said you abandoned your kids with your ex-wife and lived irresponsibly. Uncle Frank, I have primary custody of Tommy and Emma because Jennifer struggled with addiction. I work 60 to 70 hours a week to support both my household and Dad's. I haven't asked him for a penny in over 2 years. Son of a—" Frank caught himself remembering it was Christmas morning. "Jack, this explains so much. We've all been wondering how Richard afforded his lifestyle on unemployment and Social Security. And we couldn't understand why you seemed so distant at family gatherings." "I was distant because everyone was treating me like I was using the family," I explained. Now I know why. Frank's anger was building as he processed the implications. "That lying— Jack, I owe you a huge apology. We all do. Richard borrowed $5,000 from me 6 months ago, claiming you refused to help with his medical expenses. He said you were being selfish and irresponsible with money. Another lie, another manipulation. Richard had borrowed money from Uncle Frank, using my supposed refusal to help as justification, when the reality was that I had already paid all his medical bills in full. "Where did that money go, Frank?" I asked, suspecting the answer would be revealing. He said he was using it for medical bills, but Carol saw him at the casino in Atlantic City last month. She thought it was strange that he could afford to gamble when he was supposedly struggling financially. The pattern of deception was even worse than I had imagined. Richard had not only lied about my character to manipulate family relationships, but he had also used those lies to extract money from other relatives, money that he had then wasted on gambling and entertainment. "I need to call everyone," I told Frank. "This has gone on too long, and the truth needs to come out." "You do that, son. And Jack, I'm proud of you for taking care of your father even when he didn't deserve it. That shows real character." The validation from Uncle Frank gave me strength to continue making the difficult calls. I contacted Aunt Carol next, explaining the financial reality and Richard's systematic lies about my character and parenting. "Oh my goodness, Jack," she said after hearing the truth. "I've been feeling so sorry for Richard, thinking you were taking advantage of him. He painted such a picture of you being irresponsible and demanding. I actually thanked him last month for being such a good grandfather since you apparently weren't stepping up as a father." The pain of learning how thoroughly Richard had destroyed my reputation was intense, but also motivating. Each conversation revealed another layer of manipulation, another family relationship that had been poisoned by his lies. He borrowed money from Frank, claiming I refused to help with medical bills. I told Carol, "But I've paid every medical expense he's had for 2 years. "That snake," Carol said bluntly. "Jack, I want you to know that several of us have been concerned about Richard's stories. They never quite added up, especially knowing your mother and how she raised you boys. But we didn't want to question him directly because he seemed so upset about the situation." I spent the next hour systematically calling cousins, aunts and uncles explaining the truth about my financial support for Richard and the lies he had spread about my character and parenting. Each conversation was both painful and liberating, revealing the scope of damage while beginning the process of repair. Cousin Beth was mortified. "Jack, I'm so sorry. Dad told us you had become selfish and irresponsible since your divorce. We thought you were taking advantage of Uncle Richard's kindness. I had no idea you were the one supporting him. He's been trying to build a custody case against me with my ex-wife," I explained, "using lies about my parenting and financial stability." "That's horrible," Beth responded. "Listen, my husband works in family law. If you need character references or testimony about Richard's manipulation, we'll provide whatever support you need." The offer of legal support was unexpected and deeply meaningful. As I continued making calls, similar offers emerged from family members who felt guilty about their treatment of me and angry about Richard's deception. Uncle Pete offered to write a detailed statement about Richard's lies and my actual character. Cousin Danny, who worked as a social worker, volunteered to provide professional testimony about the psychological damage Richard had caused by manipulating my children. Aunt Linda said she would call Jennifer directly to explain what Richard had really been doing and why his statements about my parenting were false. By the time I finished the calls, Richard was sitting on his front steps, with his head in his hands, the magnitude of his collapsing lies overwhelming him. Sarah had gone inside to comfort my children, who were confused about why Christmas morning had turned into such a disaster. "They're all calling me," Richard said quietly. "Everyone you just talked to. They're angry, Jack. Really angry." "They should be angry," I replied. "You lied to them about me, borrowed money under false pretenses, and manipulated their relationships with their own nephew. Frank said the whole family is coming over later today to talk to me," Richard continued. "Carol said she wants her money back. Pete called me a disgrace to Mom's memory." The consequences were unfolding rapidly, but they were consequences Richard had earned through months of systematic deception and betrayal. The family relationships he had poisoned were now turning against him as the truth emerged. But the most important call was yet to come, and it would determine whether Richard's manipulation had permanently damaged my relationship with my children. The phone call that changed everything came at 2:30 that afternoon. Jennifer's name appeared on my caller ID as I was helping Tommy and Emma understand why we had left Grandpa's house so suddenly. They had been asking difficult questions about family relationships and Christmas traditions, questions that broke my heart, because their innocent trust had been weaponized against their own well-being. "Jack, it's Jennifer. We need to talk." Her voice sounded different than I expected, less confrontational and more confused than hostile. I stepped into the kitchen while the kids watched a Christmas movie in the living room, needing privacy for what I suspected would be a crucial conversation. "I just got off the phone with your Aunt Carol," Jennifer continued. "She told me some things about your father that I need to understand." My heart began racing as I realized the implications. Carol had followed through on her promise to contact Jennifer directly and explain the truth about Richard's manipulation. "What did she tell you?" I asked carefully. "She said your father has been lying to both of us, that you've been financially supporting him for 2 years while he told everyone you're irresponsible, that the stories about you being a bad father are false." I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the confusion of someone whose reality had been suddenly shifted. Richard's manipulation had been so systematic that even Jennifer had been convinced of his false narrative about my character and parenting. "It's true," I confirmed. "Dad has been working to turn the family against me while I pay his bills. He's been coaching Tommy to say negative things about living with me." "Oh God," Jennifer whispered. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I thought he convinced me that you were planning to move away with the kids. He said you were poisoning them against me, making them afraid to visit me." The scope of Richard's lies was even broader than I had understood. He had not only convinced Jennifer that I was an unfit father, but also that I was actively alienating the children from their mother. By creating fictional grievances on both sides, he had positioned himself as the solution to problems he had invented. I've never said anything negative about you to the kids, I told her truthfully. I want them to have a good relationship with both of us. I know that now, she said, her voice breaking. Your aunt explained how hard you've been working to support your father while taking primary custody after my drinking got out of control. She said you've been encouraging the kids to love me even when it would have been easier to turn them against me. The conversation revealed how thoroughly Richard had manipulated both of us, convincing Jennifer that I was her enemy, while simultaneously building a case that I was an unfit parent. His scheme required us to remain suspicious and hostile toward each other, rather than working together for our children's benefit. The custody filing, I said. Carol told you about that? I'm not filing anything, Jennifer said firmly. Jack, I was so confused and scared by what your father was telling me that I almost made a terrible mistake. But I know you're a good father. I know those kids are safe and happy with you. The relief was overwhelming. Richard's most dangerous scheme had collapsed before it could destroy my relationship with my children. Jennifer's decision to trust the truth over his manipulation meant that Tommy and Emma would not be subjected to another traumatic custody battle. He showed me pictures, Jennifer continued. Photos of the kids looking tired or upset, claiming it was evidence that you don't take care of them properly. But Carol helped me understand that he was documenting normal childhood moments and twisting them into evidence of neglect. The soccer game last weekend, I said understanding. He took pictures of them after they'd been playing in the mud. That's exactly right. He showed me those photos and said it proved you don't maintain their hygiene or supervise them adequately. But they were just kids who had been playing sports and having fun. The psychological manipulation had been sophisticated and cruel, taking innocent moments of childhood activity and reframing them as evidence of parental failure. Richard had understood that Jennifer's guilt about her own struggles with addiction would make her particularly susceptible to accusations about my parenting. There's something else, Jennifer said. He's been calling me for weeks, asking leading questions about whether you've ever seemed angry or impatient with the kids. He was trying to get me to remember negative interactions that he could use as ammunition. Did you give him anything he could use? I asked, worried about what Jennifer might have said during Richard's psychological fishing expeditions. No, because there wasn't anything to give him, she said. Jack, even during our worst times, even when I was drinking and our marriage was falling apart, I never saw you be anything but patient and loving with Tommy and Emma. That's why his accusations never quite made sense to me. The validation meant everything. Despite the pain of our divorce and her own struggles, Jennifer had maintained an honest assessment of my character as a father. Richard's manipulation had confused and frightened her, but it had not completely overcome her direct knowledge of my parenting. I want to do something to help fix this, Jennifer continued. Your father's lies could have destroyed our kids' stability and security. They could have put them through another traumatic custody evaluation for no reason, except his twisted need for revenge. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to call him directly and tell him that I know he's been lying. I want him to understand that his manipulation failed, and that you and I are going to work together to protect our children from his psychological games. The idea of Jennifer confronting Richard directly was both appealing and concerning. His desperation was escalating as his lies collapsed, and desperate people often made dangerous decisions. Be careful, I warned her. He's losing everything right now. His financial support is gone, the family knows he's been lying, and his schemes are falling apart. People in that situation can become unpredictable. I understand, she said. But he needs to know that his manipulation has consequences, and our kids need to see that their parents are united in protecting them. After Jennifer and I finished our conversation, I felt a profound sense of relief mixed with anticipation. Richard's most dangerous scheme had been neutralized, but the reckoning for his betrayal was far from over. As evening approached, cars began arriving at Richard's house. Uncle Frank's pickup truck, Aunt Carol's sedan, Cousin Pete's SUV. The extended family gathering that Richard had dreaded was about to commence, and he would have to face the consequences of his systematic lies and manipulation. At 6 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Richard standing on my front porch, his appearance disheveled and his eyes red with exhaustion and tears. Behind him in the driveway, I could see Uncle Frank waiting in his truck. "Jack." Richard set his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I need to talk to you." "About what?" I asked, not inviting him inside where Tommy and Emma might overhear another painful adult conversation. "About fixing this, about making things right, about keeping my family together." The man who had been humiliating me in front of my children 12 hours earlier was now begging for forgiveness and reconciliation. But the transformation seemed motivated more by desperation than genuine remorse. "The family meeting didn't go well," I asked. Richard's expression crumbled completely. "They want me to pay back the money I borrowed. They want me to publicly apologize to you at the next family gathering. They want me to write a letter to Jennifer explaining that everything I told her about your parenting was false." The extended family had imposed consequences that addressed both the financial and reputational damage Richard had caused. But their demands also created an opportunity for genuine repair if Richard was willing to follow through with humility and honesty. "Frank said if I don't make this right, I'm not welcome at family gatherings anymore," Richard continued. "Carol said I've dishonored Mom's memory by lying about you after you kept your promise to take care of me." The reference to my mother's final wishes was particularly powerful. She had been the emotional center of our family, and her dying request for mutual support had been sacred to all of us. Richard's violation of that trust by manipulating and betraying the son she had asked to care for him represented the deepest possible betrayal of family values. "What do you want from me?" I asked directly. "I want you to give me another chance," he said desperately. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust and the family's respect. I'll go to counseling, I'll get a job, I'll stop the gambling. Just please don't abandon me completely." The admission about gambling confirmed what Uncle Frank had suspected about where the borrowed money had actually gone. Richard's financial problems were more complex than simply unemployment and medical expenses. They included self-destructive behavior that had wasted money while he accepted my support. "And my children?" I asked. "What about the psychological damage you've caused them by coaching Tommy to doubt his father's love?" "I'll fix that too," Richard promised. "I'll tell them the truth about how much you love them and how hard you work to take care of them. I'll undo the damage I've caused." The conversation continued for 20 more minutes with Richard making increasingly desperate promises and pleas. But the most important question remained whether his desperation would translate into genuine change or simply more sophisticated manipulation. As Uncle Frank's truck waited in the driveway and Richard begged for forgiveness on my front porch, I had to decide whether redemption was possible or whether some betrayals created permanent breaks in family relationships. The decision I made would determine not only Richard's future, but also what lessons my children learned about justice, forgiveness, and the consequences of betrayal. 3 months later, I stood in the same driveway where Richard had begged for forgiveness on Christmas Day. But everything about our family dynamic had fundamentally changed. The man who approached me now moved with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced his failures honestly and worked systematically to repair the damage he had caused. Richard had followed through on every promise he made that desperate December evening. Within a week of our confrontation, he had enrolled in counseling with a therapist who specialized in depression and family relationships. The sessions revealed that his betrayal of me had stemmed from deep shame about losing his job and becoming financially dependent on his son, feelings that had metastasized into resentment and revenge rather than being addressed constructively. The gambling addiction that Uncle Frank had suspected was confirmed and addressed through a 12-step program. Richard discovered that he had been using casino visits as an escape from his feelings of inadequacy, spending money borrowed from family members on the illusion of control and success. The psychological work was painful, but necessary, forcing him to confront the weakness and selfishness that had driven his manipulation. Most importantly, Richard had kept his promise to repair his relationship with Tommy and Emma. The process had been gradual and careful, supervised at first, to ensure that his efforts to undo the psychological damage he had caused were genuine and effective. He had admitted to Tommy that he had been wrong to ask negative questions about living with Daddy, explaining that Grandpa had been sad and confused and had made very bad choices. The conversation with my 6-year-old son had been heartbreaking but healing. Tommy had been carrying guilt and confusion about the divided loyalties Richard's coaching had created, wondering if loving Grandpa meant he had to criticize Daddy, or if defending Daddy meant he was betraying Grandpa. Richard's honest admission of wrongdoing had freed Tommy from that impossible emotional burden. Richard had also written the letter to Jennifer that the family had demanded, formally retracting every accusation he had made about my parenting and acknowledging the systematic lies he had spread. Jennifer had shared portions of that letter with me, and Richard's admission of his manipulation had been complete and unambiguous. But perhaps the most significant change was Richard's employment situation. At 62 years old, he had found part-time work at a local hardware store, a job that provided both income and dignity. The work was not enough to cover all his expenses, but it demonstrated his commitment to reducing his financial dependence on family members. More importantly, it gave him purpose and self-respect that had been missing since his layoff from the factory. The financial arrangement we eventually negotiated reflected these changes. I agreed to help with essential bills like utilities and medical expenses, but Richard now covered his mortgage payment and car loan from his own income and savings. The assistance I provided was structured as temporary support, while he rebuilt his financial independence, not the open-ended subsidization that had enabled his earlier resentment. The extended family relationships had also been repaired through Richard's systematic efforts to acknowledge his lies and manipulation. He had attended the Martin family reunion in February and publicly apologized for the false stories he had spread about me, explaining the depression and shame that had driven his behavior, while taking full responsibility for the damage he had caused. Uncle Frank had been particularly gracious about the money Richard had borrowed under false pretenses, accepting a payment plan that allowed Richard to repay the debt gradually while maintaining his dignity. The family's forgiveness had been conditional on Richard's continued commitment to honesty and personal growth, but it had also been genuine once his efforts to change became obvious. But the most profound transformation was in Richard's relationship with my children. The grandfather who had manipulated Tommy's emotions and photographed Emma's innocent moments to build a custody case had become a source of stability and love in their lives. Richard now understood that his role was to support my parenting, not undermine it, and to add joy to the children's lives, rather than creating psychological confusion. Tommy's soccer games had become opportunities for 3 generations to bond, rather than moments for secret photography and character assassination. Richard cheered enthusiastically from the sidelines, took genuine pride in his grandson's athletic development, and offered encouragement and support that reinforced my own parenting, rather than contradicting it. Emma had been too young to fully understand the adult conflicts that had erupted at Christmas, but she had felt the tension and confusion that Richard's manipulation had created. Watching her grandfather's consistent kindness and support over the following months had restored her sense of family security and trust. The therapeutic process had also helped me understand my own role in enabling some of the dysfunction that had led to Richard's betrayal. My desire to honor my mother's dying wishes had sometimes prevented me from setting appropriate boundaries or addressing problematic behavior directly. Learning to help family members while maintaining self-respect and clear expectations had been a crucial lesson in the aftermath of our Christmas crisis. As spring arrived and our new family dynamic stabilized, I realized that Richard's betrayal had ultimately forced positive changes that might never have occurred otherwise. His desperation to maintain a false narrative about his independence and my character had exploded in ways that made honest communication and genuine relationship repair necessary. The extended family was stronger and more connected than it had been in years. Jennifer and I were cooperating more effectively as co-parents, united by our shared experience of Richard's manipulation and our commitment to protecting our children from adult conflicts. Tommy and Emma had a grandfather who supported their father rather than undermining him, and they had learned valuable lessons about honesty, accountability, and the possibility of redemption. On this particular Saturday in March, as I watched Richard help Tommy practice batting in the backyard, while Emma collected flowers for a bouquet, I reflected on the complexity of justice and forgiveness in family relationships. Richard's betrayal had been cruel and systematic, motivated by selfishness and pride rather than any legitimate grievance. The damage he had nearly caused to my relationship with my children was unforgivable in the abstract. But families are not abstract institutions governed by rigid principles of justice. They are collections of flawed human beings whose lives are intertwined in ways that make permanent separation traumatic for everyone involved. Richard's willingness to face his failures honestly and work consistently to repair the damage he had caused had made forgiveness possible without requiring me to forget or minimize his betrayal. The lesson I learned through those painful months was that true strength sometimes requires protecting boundaries and demanding accountability, even from people we love. Enabling destructive behavior out of misguided loyalty or fear of conflict often leads to greater damage than honest confrontation. My children needed to see their father standing up for dignity and respect, not accepting abuse for the sake of preserving false peace. But they also needed to see that redemption is possible when someone commits genuinely to change. Richard's transformation from manipulative betrayer to supportive grandfather had shown Tommy and Emma that people can recognize their mistakes and work to become better. That lesson about the possibility of growth and repair would serve them well as they navigated their own relationships throughout their lives. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, and my children's laughter mixed with Richard's encouraging voice, I felt a deep sense of peace that had been missing from our family for far too long. Justice had been served through consequences and accountability, but mercy had also been extended through the opportunity for redemption. The man who had humiliated me in front of my children on Christmas morning had become someone who celebrated their achievements and supported their emotional development. The father who had tried to destroy my reputation while accepting my financial support had become someone who took responsibility for his actions and worked to earn forgiveness through consistent change. Most importantly, Tommy and Emma had learned that their father would fight for their well-being and dignity, while also modeling the values of forgiveness and redemption when those fights were won. They had seen that family relationships require both boundaries and grace, both accountability and mercy. As we gathered around the dinner table that evening, Richard offered a blessing that acknowledged the painful journey we had traveled together and the gratitude we all felt for the opportunity to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty and respect. The Christmas morning that had begun with betrayal and humiliation had ultimately led to deeper understanding and stronger family bonds. The lesson I carry from that experience is that protecting what matters most sometimes requires difficult confrontations with people we love. But when those confrontations are handled with dignity and openness to redemption, they can create opportunities for relationships to become stronger and more authentic than they were before the crisis occurred. True family strength comes not from avoiding conflict or accepting dysfunction, but from facing problems honestly and working together to create relationships based on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared commitment to each other's well-being. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping peace and standing up for what's right in your own family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. about how you handled situations where family relationships were tested by betrayal or manipulation. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others who might be facing similar family challenges find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming difficult relationships and finding strength in unexpected places. And please share this story with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the possibility of redemption and healing, even after serious betrayal. Sometimes the people we love need to see that change is possible and that families can emerge stronger from their darkest moments. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes in the power of truth, justice, and forgiveness. I hope your own family relationships continue to grow stronger through honest communication and mutual respect.